We're in the midst of a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers. I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I'm very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Tracy Tobin. She's the Chief People Officer at AdSwerve. Tracy, it's so good to see you. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I will do my best to remember all of that. My name is Tracy Tobin. My pronouns are she, her, and I am, as you said, currently the Chief People Officer at AdSwerve. And previously, I had spent quite a lot of time, always hate to say exactly the number of years, but it has been a lot of years in publicly traded companies, mainly working in kind of advertising and media agencies prior to coming over to kind of the MarTech side of everything. And when I currently reside in Denver, Colorado, and AdSwerve is a fully distributed workforce. So we have concentrations in different areas and things like that, but probably in about 26 states. So that's been keeping things interesting over the last little while. And when I was growing up, believe it or not, I wanted to, in my kindergarten speech, I wanted to be an Avon lady. I have no idea where or what. I am not in the that space of it at the moment, and it's probably not even, I'm very good at it. But that was definitely, my mom will tell me at kindergarten graduation that was what I said, and she was shocked. So that's how it started. And then growing up, kind of learning more and more about, I thought I wanted to be an industrial organizational psychologist. And when I was going through college, and I ended up taking HR courses, and I was hooked from that moment, and then ended up going right from my undergrad to my master's. And while I was making that decision, I ended up getting an internship that turned into a full-time job. One of the best things I ever did was honestly start my job and my master's program right at the same time. Huge accelerator in just learning and growth. I was able to quickly apply what I was learning on a day-to-day basis there. And here we are many years later. So it's been a great ride, and lots of different things over the course of the years. So hopefully I answered everything.
Yes, you absolutely answered everything. I love that you remember exactly what you said in your kindergarten speech. Fast forward to today, as the leader of the people team, we get this question a lot in terms of how do we know we're doing a good job with company culture? What are key indicators to look to say what our company culture is? When you're thinking about that at AdSwerve, are there qualitative and quantitative metrics that you look to?
Absolutely. So like I hope most people out there and listening, we do an employee engagement survey. We do one on our behalf, like for us, on an annual basis. We also participate in a couple of others, as many of us do, Inc. Best Places. So you get survey results and you can compare year to year on those. We also do what we call pulse surveys as well. And we get a lot of different questions answered. And so we're taking a look at that on a weekly basis and seeing where we're trending, what's going up, what's going down. The other thing that we look at is obviously we take a look at our reviews on many different places. And we also we very closely track what we would call our turnover and retention rate. So we look at both and kind of the whys behind that as we are going through all of our exit interviews and everything else. So it is very closely tracked. And, as most people I think have experienced, it's been different this year than it was last year, and different points in the time. So it's been very interesting to look at and monitor, to be honest.
Yeah, we're talking about tracking a lot of different data points and touch points, questions that you ask to employees as well. Let's talk about the action in terms of, how do you define, celebrate, and model what behavior is celebrated, but also what behavior is not acceptable in plain terms. What are your thoughts on that model?
Oh, such a good and relevant question. So I know today we'll get into a few different things that we've done from a culture standpoint, some things we've done specifically from a DEI standpoint, but we've also done a lot with employee connectivity in our distributed workforce. So we can touch on all, and we've talked about that. What I would say to you in the acceptable and unacceptable is we are in the midst currently of putting together. A lot of companies will have like a brand guide, or they'll have certain things like that. What we are literally in the process of putting together is a culture guide. And a culture guide will have for us, from kind of the executive committee and team to the leadership and down, is what do we view, not only from our DEI lens, but also from just a very, very strong, culture lens. And in there is, what do we expect from acceptable behaviors and what are unacceptable behaviors? And we've had a lot of conversation at the executive team around that and about that, and how not only what those behaviors are, but how they show up in our workplace, in our culture. And, so that we have had lengthy conversations. So we're working on taking it from conversation to guide, to show we call them team members, our team members, what it means and how it's going to show up and what they can hold us accountable to.
I love that there's a guide and a framework for that as well, instead of just having a conversation and unspoken rules on that as well. It's really helpful for
I'm really excited. And I think what we've learned in a lot of discussions, which I know you and I will talk about, was we have different pillars for an ambassador group that we have. What we learned is that we all think we know what culture is. We all think we will define it. But when we put some teams together, we realized the absence was causing them to want to create it and put it in writing, right? And do some things. And while that was very kind and very thoughtful of them, we were like, let us, you shouldn't be telling us, we should hopefully be kind of sharing it with you, and then you can help us with how does that kind of get communicated out, and what do we want to do, how do we live and breathe that, because we have pillars and we have things like that. But really truly, I think this is going to be a great way for us as we move forward, for new hires, for current people, for even managers and others, to be able to like, here's what it is, here's what it says, here's what we all know, and people to understand what we mean by it and what we'll do with that.
Absolutely. You mentioned kind of goals around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Every company has a different North Star in ways that they really prioritize this as well. What does that look like at AdSwerve?
Sure. So we may do things a little bit different, and we're proud of what we do. We have some work still to do, but I do think it's something worth noting. And we've definitely been talking about it. So what we're trying to do first, before you just set straight goals, is really trying to get a better understanding and get more input and involvement in our, what we would call our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. So that's the first thing I would say. And what we've done is we have a group that we call the ambassador group, and it's broken down into 5, we call them pillars, so not to confuse anything. But we basically, what they are is, we have a group called the idea group, we have recruiting, hiring, and retention, we have training and development, culture, and business development. And happy to take you through kind of any and all of those. But idea is what they are centered on is they are the kind of voice of the employee. We want to be able to have our team members go to people to ask questions, to be able to say, I mean, really have anything. They are employee-led, voice of the employee, kind of that central hub for employee involvement in anything with diversity, equity, and inclusion. That group then can help kind of share and shepherd them to other areas. They also do things like our discussion groups. They run those, and some folks may call them like employer resource groups, which is a little bit of it is, but we have discussion groups that they'll lead, discussion group leaders and discussion members. And usually on a monthly, anywhere between like 3 to 6 weeks, they'll get together and talk about relevant topics, interesting topics, just being able to share that and have a place where people can have differences, but also be able to talk through. And they are kind of this idea group is really that bridge between our team members, the ambassador groups, and our leadership. And we'll talk in a second, but the other pillar groups, each of them all have executive sponsors so that they have help and guidance and can connect back. So the idea group is one. We have the recruiting, hiring, and retention, which is another, and they are all about, kind of auditing our existing recruiting, hiring, and retention efforts, thinking of new ways and welcoming new people, enabling them to kind of come into an open, diverse environment where individuals of all backgrounds are able to flourish. So we're working on a number of different things in that group, establishing some benchmarks. We are working through internships that are a little bit different than others may have seen them, and just starting with that. So we have a lot headed in that group. We also have a training and development, what we would call pillar team. They do quite a bit. So they provide learning opportunities to grow the skills that, we think are required to think and behave inclusively. And foster better understanding. So they handle everything from cultural awareness. They are working on compliance training that's required, as we all know, but what is the best way? We have obviously many, many states now. We have many, different countries. So they're really looking at all of that. The other thing too, that I think is really interesting that they're looking at is, and in our business, exploring opportunities to expand and implement like best practices around universal design and accessibility options that pertain to really like our website, our internet, like all of the things that we are thinking about, and we work with everybody on, but sometimes you are your own worst kind of like customer of sorts in that. So really looking at even our website and making it more accessible, and what are things we need to do. And since we do work within our customer base, what else can we do to implement more of that? So they've got quite a bit of things that they've been there's so much we could spend all day, and new blogs. So and then really culture team, which isn't one that we had talked about. I'm excited we just talked about the culture guide, and I'll share more, and the business development team. And the business development team is an exciting one because they're really kind of helping to develop strategy with their executive sponsor and who we do business with, aligning local community support with our DEI ambition, and having more diverse voices and perspectives in our sales development and in our kind of way we go after new business and such like that. So happy to share more, but that hopefully gives you, we have five groups in our ambassador group.
I love that. It sounds like there are a lot of different kind of buckets and ways that you are thinking around diversity, equity, and inclusion as well, and internal, external, related to customers, employees as well. When you mentioned the ambassador program, can you tell me a little bit more about that and how this is key to your strategy of belonging and equity?
Sure, absolutely. So what we've noticed over the last several years, and we had put the idea team in place first, we realized that we had those 4 areas that we were really spending a lot of time in, and wanted to be a little more exclusive and putting time and effort. And we had a lot of passionate people. So what we wanted to start out with was taking those that were definitely passionate about these areas and things that we needed help with, helping us audit what we're currently doing in these areas, helping us think through what should be done. So pairing them with that executive sponsor so that they feel like they have a voice, they have a way. And a lot of what's happened too is it's broken down some barriers when we've had different communication that needs to go out. That group is typically the first to know, and they're also seeing it, and they have involvement. Sometimes it may be the executive team or leadership team saying, hey, we want to go do this. Other times, like I've shared with the ID team, they may say, and they raise, they ping us, and we grab a quick meeting or Slack, and we have Slack channels. Hey, these things are coming up. We really think this will be important. And, what if we do XYZ? And we're like, great, let's work on that. Do you want to do it? So there's a lot more collaboration, I would say, in the way it happens. And, we're all meeting on a pretty regular basis to go through that. So we knew we needed more help. We had shared what the areas were, kind of went out and got about 24 people. So we're sitting at about a 10-ish plus percent of our population, and which is great. So, and then hopefully getting more as we go and kind of getting the word out there. So
Yeah, I think that is great. Thank you for kind of
yeah,
sharing a little bit more about that as well for folks who are listening to, who might want to implement something similar at their organization. The other piece that you mentioned earlier in our conversation, and I think is so important as well, is that employee connectivity piece.
yes.
How do you define what that is, and how are you creating those really authentic and meaningful moments for your team?
Absolutely. So we've noticed, like many, and you did it in your intro, it has been very interesting times over the last 3 years. I will say to you, a portion of our business, even prior to 2020, was what we would call remote. I think the verbiage that we've changed from remote to distributed is because remote makes it feel truly like you are out there. You're not included in all of this other stuff. And that isn't how it is. What we have tended, what we've really made a strategy out of is we want to be very considerate about where we're at, how we're at, and what we're doing with that. So not only is it a lot of work as we have more and more states and people and different things, we also, it's hard to be the lone person in certain areas. And so what we've done, and you and I had talked about it briefly, was we knew that folks needed different types of connections. So we have an employee connectivity group, similar, made up of people who are working on these things, and again, passionate. Some of them it's within their job description, some of them are like raising their hand saying this is really important to me, and can do it well and have a significant amount of value to add, as well as they feel it, and so they can give that perspective. So what we do is we've kind of broken it out as well. So same thing, we have a few different areas. Not only do we have recognition being one, we have learning, kind of learning and development training being one area. We also we have like that actual workplace experience and connectivity. And the other is we're really trying hard to figure out ways for volunteering in and bringing that back. I think there's quite a bit. What I think is worthy of noting at this moment is we have made the decision to be very conscious, and we every year put budget towards our employee connectivity. So this past year, we did a first time since 2019, we did a summit where we brought in everyone. And we hit, I'd have to say 80-ish%. So we had about 188 people. And at that time earlier in May, we were sitting maybe around 250 ish and such. So we ended up bringing everyone to Vegas. We had 3+ days and it was amazing, right? This was the first time people in years had met their boss in person. I call it eyeballs to eyeballs type of thing. Like it was very much, and created a great starting point. And then what we've also decided and made a very conscious decision on and followed through with budgets is we want what we call teams and departments to get together and do planning meetings and planning sessions. I was sharing with you before we went on today. My team was in, Denver doing it this week, and we had the finance team and we had the marketing team. And so the opportunity for people to come together, spend a few days together, doing what they do best, but also spending time connecting too. So we do different activities, different workshops, talking about how best to communicate and unconscious motivators. And we also spend time doing things like hiking and going to different, we've done food tours. So the teams are not just spending time doing planning sessions and all of that. They are spending time outside of that as well. So that's been a big, big focus. And we have been, the other area I would say is we've broken down the country, if you will, mainly, and we have folks internationally into what we would say regions. So we have folks in kind of the New York, Connecticut, New Jersey area, and they have a budget and they get together often. And they get to go do the things that they want to do. We have folks in Northern California, Southern California. We have 2 different kind of groups in Oregon based on location. So we break that up so they're able to get together. And what I think is important for people to recognize is these are groups that don't necessarily work on the same team and don't even potentially work together because they are in separate areas that may not necessarily cross over. So it gives them like, hey, I know somebody, not too far down the street, and they're here at AdSwerve and this and that. So we've been trying really hard to have that be an option in things that they want to do. So we've had all sorts of different activities, in some areas better than others, but we're really working towards, I think that's important to get to know and get to see. And so multiple areas, multiple ways, continuing to refine it, but it's so far so good.
No, absolutely. I think investing time, budget, resources, and employee connectivity is really demonstrative examples that you provided as well, and really personalizing it too for employees. Tracy, is there anything that I didn't directly ask that you want to share with folks, or any key insights you want to underscore?
No, I think you've done a really great job. I mean, I think the only thing I would say, and just that we've kind of had to do ourselves, is, everything takes time. It's a journey, and keeping refining. We call it it's iterative process. So we constantly are getting feedback in what we talked about, the engagement, as well as our pulse surveys. So we allow it to be a little bit flexible. And the one thing I did forget to mention is we also have been adding a kind of virtual connectivity, so that they have done activities virtually so that people can get in, and we're talking about like different arts and crafts. And like I said, we're moving into this volunteer space as well, because we already offer 2 days of volunteering, and now we'd love for people to be able to spend time, because I think it's always better to do it with others and teams. It tends to be a really great thing. So that's where we're headed, and getting more and more into.
Awesome. Well, that is really exciting, Tracy. Thank you so much for being
Yes.
for Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, and AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.